algebraic equations using inverse operations to solve. All right, so to solve an equation, what that means is to find the value of the variable. And the way that you find the value of the variable is by getting the variable by itself. Well, how do we do that? Well, in our head, we will ask ourselves what is happening to our variable. In other words, is it being added by something? Is it being subtracted by something? Is the variable being multiplied by something? Is the variable being divided by something? And whatever is happening to our variable, we will do the inverse of what's happening to get the variable by itself. So, for example, in problem number 1, the x is being added by 29. Well, the inverse of addition is subtraction. So we will do that on both sides of the equation. When I say both sides, I'm talking about how the equal sign separates the left side from the right side, so we will do it on both sides of the equation. Then we will work down. 29 minus 29 is 0. You do not have to show the 0. You can just bring down the x. Negative 87 minus 29, well, subtraction is the same as that in the opposite. If you want to make it out in the opposite, you may. Some of you might be allowed to use a calculator. If that's the case, maybe you'll just get the answer right away. Negative 116. And now you can see we have the x by itself. This is what it means to solve the equation. We now know that x must equal negative 116 to make the original equation even work. Problem number 2, what's happening to our variable? Well, this time the variable is y, and it's on the right side of the equal sign. Don't let that fool you. What's happening to it? It's being subtracted by 137. The inverse would be to add by 137. Notice I'm only inversing the operation. What I mean by that is I'm only looking at subtraction, addition, multiplication, division. I'm not caring about the sign of the number. I didn't make the 137 become negative. I kept it as 137 like it was originally. We are only inversing the operation from subtraction to addition. We're not inversing the number that was with that operation. That's very important that you get that right. So back to what I was saying. We're adding by 137 because that's the inverse of subtracting by 137. We do it on both sides. We work down. 18 plus 137 gives us 155, and that equals the y. Notice the y came straight down. It's okay to have the variable on the right side of the equal sign. It means the same thing if I had y on the left and 155 on the right. Problems 3 and 4. Well, in number 3, what's happening to the variable? Well, this time the number is next to the variable with nothing in between. Hopefully you know that means it's being multiplied. Well, the inverse of multiplication is division. But watch out. Notice I did not lose the negative sign. Why? Because as I told you before, we are not going to inverse the number. We only inverse the operation. The inverse of multiplication was division. Do not change the sign of the number. That is along with what was happening to the variable. So that negative 34 is still negative 34. So we divide by that on both sides. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. Again, if you're allowed to use a calculator, perhaps you would use it, and you get positive 11.5. Problem number 4. What's happening to the variable? Well, this time the variable is in the numerator of a fraction. Fractions are a creative way of writing division problems. If the variable is in the numerator of that fraction, then yes, you can say the variable is being divided by the 18. The inverse of division is multiplication. We do it on both sides. 4 times 18 will give us 72. Now, be careful. I know I told you fractions can mean division, but if the fraction is next to the variable with nothing in between, then that means the variable is being multiplied by that fraction. The inverse would be to divide, and that will give you the answer of 207. Now, if you're not allowed to use a calculator, then I should let you know of an alternate way of doing this problem. Since dividing by 2/9 is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal, there will be some math teachers that will actually teach you to multiply by the reciprocal on both sides. It means the same thing as dividing by the fraction, but this is what you would have to do if you weren't using a calculator. You would still get the same answer. So, in a nutshell, always ask what's happening to the variable and do the inverse of what's happening to it to get the variable by itself. That is how you solve an equation.